Well, hi everyone, and welcome to part one of our training series. In particular, our training series on the hosting ministry. And before we get any further, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this area, or this ministry area. It is so important. It really is. It really is. I can't even express to you how important it is that we engage well with those that are visiting our church. There really is not much point doing everything else on the platform, etc., if we are not engaging our visitors well. And that's because we might think we're worshipping God, but if we're not really caring for those that are coming into our midst, then what value is our worship? So this is such an important ministry, and I want to thank you so much for being a part of it and stepping onto it. You may also be thinking, well, what do you mean a host ministry? I'm just on door. Well, we had the door roster, and then that sort of became ushering, and we've settled on finally calling it hosting. Because ultimately, I guess that's what we're doing. And hosting is a lot more about, hosting, being a host, hosting folks, particularly folks that are coming into the church for the first time. And it's more important, to be honest, that we focus on that area. And I know some of you, if you've put your cup of tea on and to sit down and listen to this, you might spit your tea in a minute when I say this, but hear me out as I explain it. But I think that it's actually far more important. We need to actually concentrate on those that are coming into the church for the first time. Believe it or not, and dare I say it, over and above those that are already in the church. And here's why. Let me explain. We don't necessarily need to think about or be intentional and think about welcoming those who are already our friends, because, not that we don't want to be welcoming towards them, but because we're just going to do it anyway. It's not something we've got to think about. It's like when you've got like an absolute best friend that you've known for donkey's years comes over to your house. You know you've got a really good relationship with someone when you can say to them, look, if you want to make yourself a cup of tea, you know where it all is. Have you ever had that situation where you know someone so well and you've been around to someone's house so often? I remember when we were visiting some friends in Canada that we go way back, and we hadn't seen them for a few years since they'd moved back to Canada. And one of the first things, and I took it as the greatest compliment, one of the first things they said to us when they sort of, when we came back from the car ride from the airport and actually dropped our bags in their house because we were staying with them, was basically, food's in the fridge, the coffee machine is there, whatever, just help yourself. It was like, that is how close the relationship was. And so, we don't have to really think much about welcoming and engaging our best mates, people that we've known for a long time. And in fact, to be honest, I find that we will do it anyway, that we will slide into, particularly in a church context, we will slide into, in general, just having conversations with the people we already know, with our friends. Because to be honest, that's what's more comfortable. But God doesn't call us to comfort. He calls us to love. He calls us to mission. He calls us to joy. Extreme joy. And I've found that often the greatest joy we'll experience lies on the other side of our challenges. And I think that one of the great challenges that we have, particularly in our current context, is to engage people well, especially to engage really well with those people that are walking into a church context for the first time, that aren't sort of just, oh yeah, this is church. So that's what this series of videos is all about. I'm trying to talk about how we can do that. Hopefully you find it helpful. What I'm going to do as well is I'm just going to go down the list of tasks on the the guidelines for ushers or hosts, and we're just going to sort of quickly talk about each one. But before I do that as well, you'll notice that we've updated our Connect form. Now that's obviously backwards on the camera, but I'm just proving it to you, holding it up. The point I'm making here is that we've had a Connect form for quite some time to get people's details and things like that, and that's part of the host's role. If they see someone who is new at church, to at some stage get their details, etc. And some of those details can also be, if they want to tick them, joining the emailing list, getting on the church directory, getting on the prayer email, etc. But also it's been actually updated recently. I don't know if you've noticed to also have some other options that visitors can tick. And some of those options are, yes, I'd like to know more about Jesus, or I would like to read the Bible with someone, or I would like someone to pray with me. So these Connect forms are very, very, very important. Very, very important to being engaging well to our follow-up system that we want to adopt here at Waratah. So that just further underlines how important the hosting role is, and particularly this particular slip that folks can work through to engage with new visitors. I'm going to devote a whole video just to this slip here. But for now, let's go through the host and role and guidelines, I should say. So what's the role of a host? Well, the first and most important role of a host is helping to orientate visitors. Now, there's a couple of ways in which that happens, but the most important way, we'll talk about some of the other ways a bit down the track, but one of the most important ways is to actually introduce themselves, obviously, to the visitor. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's your task as a host to chaperone that particular visitor for the whole, 2 whatever hours on a Sunday morning, from the moment they walk in to the moment the church is locked up. One of the best ways that you can orientate a visitor is not just to orientate them in terms of show them where you can get a cup of tea, or where the conveniences are, or the parenting room, etc. But what I call relational orientation. So to ask questions of a nature that you can find out just a little bit, not crazy amounts about, but just some basic information about the person, so that you can introduce them to like-minded people in the church. And let me give you a really quick example. One thing that I have done on the odd occasion is I will ask a visitor, which part of Mandurah do you live in, which region? If they happen to say, I live in Dawesville, I say, that's cool. I live in Dawesville as well, and we talk about some things I really enjoy, or that's great about living in Dawesville, and it is great living in Dawesville. There's a few hoons around at the moment, but otherwise it's great. But the other thing is, I also know, and we should know. Okay, there's not really kind of any excuse. Like, we should know who our neighbours are from the church per se. I know roughly who else that comes to Waratah lives in Dawesville, and so I can then introduce that person to someone like a Lance and Ruth, or a Nick and Deb, or whatever, or folks that live in further down in the Timbers Edge development. We got at least, I think, 10 Waratah folks that live further south of IGA in Dawesville there. The point is that there's already something that they can talk about. They can talk about how beautiful it is to go walking along the estuary in the morning and things like that. So there's a relational orientation. All of a sudden they find themselves talking to people that they have more in common with than they would otherwise have thought. Now, it doesn't have to be a geographical thing. I'm just using that as an example. If they were to say, I live in Halls Head, then I'll introduce them to some folks I know that also live in Halls Head, or Seascapes, for example. But there's other questions you can ask as well. There might be people that are in a similar profession or have a similar background, and so on, that come to church that they do. And so the role of a host, one of the most important, roles of a host, is introducing people to people. oh, that's awesome that you enjoy that. You know what? You should come and meet so and so. They also enjoy that hobby or live in that area, or went to that school or whatever it might be, and introduce the visitor to other people in the church. And I think we're a friendly enough church to carry on those conversations. And then that means that if there's more than one visit, and there usually is, I think we had 4 of these forms filled out on Sunday. So there's usually about 2 people. There was 1, but from feedback, we've decided to make sure there was 2 folks rostered on each week for hosting. And so if you've got a multiplicity of visitors and you've only got 2 hosts, at some stage you're going to have to move between visitors. So if you're a host, when you orientate a visitor, a huge part of it is that relational orientation. And if you don't know who lives where, if you don't know who is interested in what, and so in the current Waratah conversation, well, guess what? You've got some learning to do. You've got some conversations to have. Like I said, this all begins as a ministry. When, to quote someone else who comes to Waratah, they said to me, people have to learn to walk past their mates and engage with folks that they don't necessarily know yet. So a great host actually engages with people intentionally to find out more about them, with a view to have more people that they can one day introduce visitors to. And one of the best things about being in my job is that, man, I get to find out a lot about a lot of people in a good way. In a good way. Some more practical things. It's really helpful to guide visitors to a seat, and not in a kind of you sit there way. But especially if there's a couple or a family, to say, hey, folks, where would you prefer to sit? Would you prefer to sit at a table? Would you prefer to sit in the rows, down the front, or down the back, whatever? Look, let's see if we can make sure. Let's get you comfortable. Let's find you a seat. Let's get you settled in. If it's a single person, obviously there's a bunch of things that are appropriate and inappropriate in this area. But roughly speaking, if someone looks lonely, offer to say, hey, would you like to sit with me, or would you like to sit on this table? Imagine that you've already introduced them to someone else. Say, hey, you guys should. You can sit here and you guys can carry on this conversation after the service. Things like that. This isn't really rocket science. It's really all about looking after and looking out for other people's needs above our own. Get the visitor a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. That doesn't take 5 hours. It's just 30 seconds of just go, hey, would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a coffee? Yeah, I love one. What would you have? White with none? Whatever. Yeah, okay, white with none. No worries. Straight up to the. And let me order you a cup of. But if they're interested, bring them with you. Say, hey, this. I'm just going to pull a name out. Bill here would love a white coffee with no sugar. Meanwhile, Shirley's actually on the morning tea. Shirley, this is Bill here, and then you've got that. And maybe if there's that conversation happening, you can. Sometimes maybe pull in another visitor. Sometimes it's also really awesome introducing visitors to visitors that both don't even realise they're both the first time that they're there. But getting connections happening and then leading that person into a circle conversation. You know how it is after Sunday morning. We're standing in circles of 3 to 4 or 5, bringing people into those circles and introducing them into the conversation. And then you can say, look, excuse me, I've just seen someone over there without a cup of tea. I'm just going to go and get them a cup of tea or something like that. So making sure that they've got a cup of tea or coffee in their hands and a biscuit before my son eats them all. So, yeah. It's really important also to be, just to as a resource, at some point, especially if someone looks confused, and part of being a good host is reading body language. People can usually show in their eyes when they're confused, when they're sort of like, what? Be a resource. And one of the things that's really good to just say, again, these things, they take like 10 seconds, if that. In fact, I'm going to time myself when I say it in a second. it's very, very quick to say something like, before you leave someone to go to another visitor, go, so I'm just going to leave you with such and such, but before I go, do you have any other questions? That actually took me, I'm just looking at the time, but that took me 3 seconds to ask that question. Is there any other questions? Or you could say, look, if you've got a conundrum, if you've got any questions, come and let us know. I'm just around this area. In other words, opening yourself up, intentionally opening yourself up to answer any questions. The obvious question is, well, what if they ask something that I can't answer? Well, no problem. That's what these are for. If someone has asked me a curly question occasionally, it's like, I'll say something like this. Actually, you know what? That's a really great question. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure yet. But you know what? We've got your details. I'll get back to you during the week. Something like that. It's really important, if we don't know the answer to something, to not pretend that we do and try to fudge it. You just come off looking like more... You look like an idiot when you do that. It's just way better to be honest. And I think, to be honest, when people are checking out churches today, one thing that is really attracts people in a church context is that honesty. Let's be honest, everyone's kind of allergic to hypocrisy. So that's really important. Just being honest. Just being really... sorry, I don't actually know the answer to that question. I'll get back to you on that though. And do get back to them. Let's just... What did Jesus say? Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Let's get back to folks. And if we say we're going to get back to folks, let's just do it and not forget whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Send ourselves a message or something like that on our phone. Put it in our calendar, whatever. But yeah. When we've got services that are not full kids ministries, so every second service at the moment we're still not having the full-on kids ministries. We do have activity packs that are put beside the door. And again, this is all about being aware. It's an awareness thing. Now you might be rostered on, let's say once every 6 weeks, or even once every 8 weeks if we had enough folks. As a host, it's important that we all have a space to enjoy worship and to be children of God. But also part of being children of God is loving others. In fact, the Apostle John said, he who has not love is not a child of God. And one of the ways that we can love others is just be aware. Just deliberately sit in an area of the hall. If you're a host, what happens when the service is actually started? That's the time when you can spark up your awareness. If you do see a family there, and the kids are being a bit distracted, and it's a service without kids ministries, it's so simple to it takes a minute to just rise from your seat, walk over to the entry door, and grab an activity pack, and just walk over to the table and say, hey, would you guys like an activity pack? I'm not sure you're aware that they're there. In a way that, or even ask them first, would you guys like me to go and get an activity pack? We shouldn't be in a place where our worship is so overawed and we're so hyper, shut up and listen to the that people find it awkward to get up and serve someone during the service. Take it from me, I couldn't care less if I was in the middle of preaching and I saw one of our amazing hosts on Sunday morning notice that a family was struggling with their kids when we didn't have kids ministry, and just quietly get up and just say, hey, would you like me to get an activity pack for you guys or two? And then just walk across the room, grab it, and walk back. That is not distracting. At least it shouldn't be distracting. That should just be encouraging to see that. So, part of a host is just being aware of the need. Being aware of the need. Again, if you've got a visitor, get up from their seat and walk towards the back with a confused look on their face. It's okay to jump up and, sort of hustle over and go, hey, can I help you? Do you know where the toilets are? Do you need a glass of water? That's hospitality. God loves that. God loves that. It's not breaking the reverence of worship. It would be breaking the reverence of worship to just ignore it, because that's when it's become all about ourselves. But actually being aware of others, having our antennas up to be looking around the room going, is everyone comfortable? Is there anything that needs to be addressed here? Yeah. That's it for now in terms of this first video, except for one final comment. I talked about earlier on the importance of being able to read people. Now, obviously this is being recorded while we're still living in COVID times, but I think it applies down the track, however long. It is very, very, very important to be respectful of others' boundaries. If you are a host, it is inappropriate to just walk up to someone and hug them if they have not given or even at least intimated permission for you to do so. I say that not just because it's some personal bugbear. I say that because over my time here at Waratah, and my time even in the last few years in this role, I have had one or two complaints received, and those people need to be listened to and heard. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to be robots and we all need to be terrified of each other and keeping everyone at, massive, huge distance. But let me spin it round the other way. I'm not a hugger. I'm quite introverted, and I'm just not a hugger. You know what I mean? But also, apart from just being not a hugger, I'm also just aware that some people are really uncomfortable with physical contact from random people. And look, let's just be honest, also being, sort of a middle-class white guy doesn't help. But anyway, my point is that in a social interaction, especially at church, on a Sunday morning, Bible study, whatever, my sort of policy is I will not instigate anything. I've always held that I'm not going to instigate. If someone holds out their hand, obviously they want to shake, I'll shake their hand. If someone does that, I'm not a big hugger, but I'll allow an embrace. I'm okay with that. The reason why is because in that moment, that's what they need. And I guess that's my point. It's not about us. It's not about what we need. If we need a cuddle, there are appropriate times and places for that where we can express our need and receive ministry in that sense. I was going to be fatuous and say, if you need a cuddle, buy a teddy bear. But no, honestly, that's the non-hugger talking. If that's you, then that's you. But I'm talking about when we are serving on a roster of hosts, all that kind of thing. It is inappropriate to do what we want to do because we want to do it or because we think it's appropriate. It's that simple. I'm not really going to give any apologies for this. If a person initiates a hug or something like that, then that's obviously what they want, and you're there to receive it and reciprocate it. Of course, I'm saying this also, I'm saying this for sort of, post-COVID down the track. This video is going to be up here hopefully for years to come, I guess. But thing is, it's about what other people need. If there is someone and they are not sort of walking in the door or walking into church, or when you walk up to them, they are not doing this, don't do that. Don't initiate something where there is no desire to. Just a simple handshake. Sometimes just a very gentle, reassuring, hand on the shoulder. Say, oh look, it's just over here. Hand on the shoulder. But we've got to be very careful about this. Even that's sometimes not appropriate. But we should be able to gauge from people's facial expression. We have to read body language. If people around us are doing this, the arms folded, or they're closed off, or they're never ever making eye contact, it's a pretty sure sign that they just want space. And you know what? Sometimes the best host knows when to give people space. So as I said, as someone who's not a hugger, I will, sometimes let hugs happen. There you go. That's a funny way of saying it. Let hugs happen, because in a certain moment I feel that's what the other person needs. But the point is, it's always about what the other person needs and wants. So let's make sure that we do not initiate any physical contact, especially in these current times, unless someone is coming at us wanting to initiate that contact. That's very, very important. Very, very important. I say it because, putting COVID to one side, I'm talking about even in past years, there has been that complaint. Nothing inappropriate or anything like that. Don't misunderstand me. But just that I wasn't expecting like a cuddle or something like that. It's just wait for it to be initiated. That's very, very, very important. Okay, that's it. Well, that's the end of part one. In part two, we're going to talk about when to arrive and some of the other logistical things about filling out the role, and also what happens after the service as well for those that are on the hosting ministry. So I'm hoping that you can join us then. Okay, bye-bye.